Hi there, welcome to my channel called Nugget of Wisdom. In this video, I'd like to talk about two words that are constantly used everywhere in the media and newspapers, video blogs, news channels, everywhere. And those two words are freedom and democracy. And as somebody who's lived a few decades now and has also been in the charity and the corporate and the sort of electoral world, but also as somebody who has read a lot about science, about politics, about history, religion, I would say that those two words are the most propagandized, the most misunderstood. I couldn't really describe how ridiculous those words are used, the way those and the context of those words are used in our society all the time. Especially when it comes to mainstream media and mainstream national and global political agendas. So, for starters, democracy. Does anyone really know what democracy is? Everybody seems to think democracy is something that we really need, is really important, and that we all have it. But when you actually look at democracy, say in Europe, in the UK, and the US, you realize really quickly that I have had a very deficient understanding of what democracy was. And after being in politics for a while, I decided that I would call it a shamocracy because it's a sham. And that there was absolutely no way that basically any European country could point a finger at another country and say they're undemocratic. This you've often heard that saying, calling the pot calling the kettle black. Because in my experience, there were so many devious and sometimes quite complex mechanisms in place to completely undermine any kind of democracy. And you say, okay, what is democracy? Well, in its basic form, I would say it's the ability for people to elect a person to represent them and their collective views and ideas. So you have an election, people vote, and they pick a person. Person puts forward a whole pile of policy ideas and a manifesto, and then if they win the election, they're in, and they, for a period of time, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it might be, they can come out and say, I'm going to do this, and if they do the thing they're supposed to do, they get elected again, and so on. But in essence, it's all about representation. And in fact, you see this, for example, within organizations and companies. They have a board of directors who are accountable to the shareholders, and then they select a managing director, and every now and again there's a performance appraisal, and he has to show the board, and the board have to show the shareholders how good the organization is doing, and then that person gets to continue on in that role until they retire or they do something that's unacceptable and they're replaced. But there's a fundamental flaw with that system in what we call democracy and what I call shamocracy. And it's a flaw in a way that it's a flaw to anybody who finds it, but to the public, because most of the public think we have democracy. Of course we have, but we don't really know what democracy is. And other people don't have it. You're living in a world where you can't solve a problem because, first of all, no one really understands what the problem is. Second of all, we're totally brainwashed and propagandized to believing that we have something we don't have. Right? And if you try to fix it as a flaw, you'll discover that the people who have intentionally configured the system to have this flaw don't see it as a flaw at all. They see it as something highly useful. Because the people who influence our electoral system do not care about democracy at all. They have no interest. In fact, they also don't care about national borders. This is another crazy fantasy myth that we live in. Somehow that's all nationalistic. Britain versus Europe versus America. In reality, that's a sham. And it's very easy to unpick it. If you're smart enough, you can go, of course, that didn't make any sense. But in reality, none of it makes sense, because you'll see that companies and corporations are across the globe. They have interests, companies, organizations, purchases, whatever, relationships across the globe. And corporations and companies, big companies, tend not to give a flying F about nationalism. What they will do is they will use nationalism to get people influenced in an election, so that the person that's chosen as the leader will be the person that they want to influence their interests across the globe. And it's so ridiculous. It's like, for example, what is America? Well, America is a country that's 100 years old. It's got people from all around the world living there. There's so many insane and crazy narratives that are used in the political system to set up agendas that are all about brainwashing and fooling the people into believing stuff that just isn't true. You often hear people saying, well, everybody in America is an immigrant. Yes. So you have transgender, for example. This whole argument about if your child at school might be converted into a different sex because the school decides that they're woke and they'll do these things. There's very little of that going on, believe it or not. And actually, the gender of your child is much more likely to be influenced by toxins in plastics that are made by the corporate sector than any kind of woke agenda. If you look at things like the Panama Canal, the President of America, Donald Trump, said he wanted to take the Panama Canal back from China. Why? Because it's really important for Americans in America. But it hasn't really been reported widely that in the last couple of weeks, BlackRock just bought the whole thing, bought all the rights to basically run the Panama Canal. BlackRock is a global corporate entity. They've got no specific interests in nationalism at all. And this goes on and on and on and on. If you look at, for example, the two sides of the political agenda, where you've got sort of this idea that anybody who has a liberal or a liberal view, or what is very keen on sort of a society where all genders and all races and all colors and all backgrounds have got a say and are treated fairly and so on and so forth. They're now branded as woke. Any political party that pushes any kind of sort of domineering agenda and says, right, we don't want this, we want to change that, they're seen as right-wing or extreme right-wing. And then you have the sort of MAGA, the conservative, for the country, for the people of the country. We want to bring everything back to our country. All of it is complete BS. It's complete nonsense. There's no such thing. If you go out into the street and you actually talk to people, you will not find a big group of woke people or a big group of MAGA people. You won't find them. You'll find a society with all sorts of different views and ideas that some are very intermixed. It's like in the UK. Conservatives are, privatisation, all that stuff. But if you go out and talk to conservative voters, they love the NHS, which is allegedly a very socialist idea. So what happens, in essence, is that in a shamocracy, the politicians are bought. I mean, this is the other incredible thing. You cannot have democracy if somebody can be bought. Because if you're working for the people, if a group of people elect you into a job, and you are getting paid by somebody else to do something different, it can never work. It's impossible. It can never work. And we see all these debates go on all the time. Just go on the internet and listen to all the debates from all these people. Tucker Carlson or, Russell Brand, Joe Rogan, all the people who talk about democracy. Not one single person will say, we need to take the money out of politics. And that's not to say that money is a bad thing. It's not. It's fine. But you cannot have a system with a conflict of interest in such a way. You cannot have a system, a football match, where the referee can be bought by one side or the other, or by somebody in the crowd. You can't. It doesn't work. It'll never work. And so the big problem is that until these fundamental things are not fixed, and they're simple to fix, they're the most simple, incredibly simple things. I keep saying it. You go, no, it's impossible. It's not. It's really simple. You could turn a shamocracy into democracy in a year, less than a year. And you could easily demonstrate to the masses and to the public a very logical, sensible, credible, practical set of reasons. And I'm certain that within 5 years, it would start to majorly show, that now the people who are getting into the system were not corrupted by money. They were well paid within their political roles, but they didn't have special interests, lobby groups, corporations, and so on. If you look at America and you look at the election in America with Donald Trump, the whole of the MAGA group, these people who I feel are like, nationalist Americans who like, farmers and, union guys and people who work in the manufacturing and all the workers of America, hard-earned breadwinners who want good health care. They want decent jobs. They don't want immigrants coming and taking everything. And they're absolutely signing up to an absolute nonsense situation where in less than 4 years' time, they're not going to get anything they asked for. They're going to have big problems with labour shortages. They're not going to have a medical system that's any better. They're not going to have housing that's any cheaper. Probably because of all the tariffs and the other stuff that the clearly narcissistic Trump is doing. The country's going to be in more trouble and it's going to be more expensive to buy stuff. But also, a really big part of this is the deep state. If you look at all these people who are we want to bring back things to the country in America, they're highly anti the deep state. And they look at the deep state as being sort of a kind of woke thing with all these like hidden people trying to bring in bureaucracy and waste money. But if you look at the Trump regime, I mean, they've got all these guy billionaires openly surrounding this guy. They're not the ordinary people. If you had a real democracy, the plumber, the electrician, the doctor would be the ones that got to be the leader. They've no chance. If you wanted to see your hospitals in your country doing really well, would you want to have highly experienced doctors and surgeons who'd worked in the industry for many years, who had saved people's lives, who could perform complex surgery, who had seen life and death and birth, who understood the system, who were practical, who were good speakers, who were going to fight for a good system at work? Would you want to see that person in the political system getting to be the Minister for Health or the person who's responsible for health? Or some big tech billionaire, some tech nerd who's got some sort of software gadget and is pumping loads of money into the system? Or BlackRock, the largest, whatever it is, corporation in the world, which is just basically controlling everything. So, in my view, we do not have a functional democracy in the UK, in Europe, or in the US. I would say the European Union is highly undemocratic. You've got people in the European Union running things who've never been elected, undermine individual states. But also, it's much, much worse than that. And I have experienced this, and I've seen it with my own eyes. You have got people who are highly manipulative, who are basically driving agendas within what I call puppet regimes. And the puppet regimes are puppets to the US. That's just for us, it's a fact. So not only have we not got a democracy, we don't even have elected representatives who actually have any drive to assert themselves for the country they live in, because they're constantly pandering to the US. And you just watch it. You watch how every leader who sits down with Trump absolutely sucks up to Trump and America. Because America has heavily infiltrated so many countries and bent those countries to do what the hell they want them to do. And you might say, well, that's not the case because look at the way Trump... Yeah, because Trump's a wild card. Trump's a red herring. Trump basically avoided assassination a couple of times. Trump has his own money. Trump is not from the political establishment. And Trump, it would be great if Trump was this really smart guy. And he's got a high IQ, but he's not a smart guy. He's a narcissist. So he's just completely erratic. People sit there and go, "Oh, I wonder why he did this. Perhaps he's got no strategy." Have you spoken to narcissists? I've met narcissists in my life, and he's a textbook narcissist. And he forgets the thing he decided yesterday and does something different today, because it's all about him. It's about him validating himself. And there's no democracy in any of it. It's all about who has the money to put the money into the system, to have the influence. The more millions you have, the more you can get yourself into the system to have some sort of influence. I'm not seeing it in the UK. I've seen exactly the same thing in the UK. Okay, the money here, it's not as much, but it's substantial. And, there are very, very few. It'll be a rare situation where a candidate for election in a political party in his country, if they cannot get the cash and get the influence from, or can be influenced from money, and do a deal with basically people who have loads of money to get themselves into a position, a parliamentary position, they will really struggle. And no one talks about this. And one of the reasons people don't talk about this is that the whole system in the UK is completely obsessed, and I say system, the media system, with making sure the public do not cotton on to the most basic fact that our system is rotten to the core, politically rotten. There are so many mechanisms in place with our political system to make it look like you have a say. You have absolutely none. And in fact, you know this. You kind of know it intuitively. You kind of feel it. That's why people go, I can't be bothered. Because the outcomes aren't there. You have all this narrative all the time. Oh, yes, we're changing the country. We're doing this. We're doing making things better. But there's always this problem. There's always, oh, we're in debt. Oh, we're going into recession. Oh, we can't afford this. When in reality, we've never been a richer country in the history of the world. The world has never been richer. The world has never had as much technology. We should all be living fantastic life circumstances when it comes to the basic needs: eating, food, health. But people have been fooled for generations. This is not just decades, this is generations. So that's the first word, democracy. We do not have a democracy. And that's why anybody who ever says to you, look at that country over there, just say, hold on a sec. Before you start trying to dictate to the rest of the world how they should run their democracy, you've got to have one yourself, and you don't have one. What you have is a sham, which is what I call a shamocracy. And as I say, it's very easy to prove. It's one of the easiest arguments you could possibly have. Just look at the US and how much money goes into elections. I mean, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars to influence elections. The people who are putting out money in, if you gave somebody £5,000, £500 to do something for you and they didn't do it, you wouldn't be happy. People are spending hundreds of millions in the US to influence a system that's supposed to be for the masses, not for a select few. And we all know for certain that money does not buy you smarts. Money does not make a smart person. Because somebody who's in policy and politics, you can have all the money in the world, but it will not give you insights into how to make a good health service or support manufacturing or whatever it might be. The expertise and your ability to do a good job will not solely be dependent on money. You can inherit money. You could literally be from a family that you just inherited the money from your parents, and you could walk into the political system. You could win the lottery. If I won the lottery tomorrow morning, I won, say, the Euro Millions, and I won, say, 10 million, I guarantee you 100%, all I have to do is knock on the door of a political party, and I'll be there. They might even offer me a safe seat somewhere. I would guarantee you 100% if I won the Euro Millions and I really wanted to be a politician, within about 5 years, I'd get to be an MP. But if I spent all my time and effort doing something really, really, really amazing for my community, changing, improving things, making things, advising, getting involved in all sorts of important improvements, and then I put my hand up and said, I would like to go run for election. It'll be the biggest struggle you've ever had unless you got the money. So it's not emeritus. There's no merit here. There's no fairness to any of it. And also, you've got to be in a political party. This is the thing. The idea that an independent electoral representative can get a job done is shunned upon in the UK. I was independent and for a long time, and I was able to do so much and so much more, and I was able to bring people together. I was out of those horrendous, horrible parties with their party political absolute bull BS. And I was able to really do things. But in the UK, you have no chance, and in the US, you have no chance of getting yourself elected in the political system because people have been brainwashed that you need parties. And then the parties are all influenced by people behind the scenes who switch parties. Special interests who switch parties depending on what they want, play them off each other. It's rotten, that's what I say. It's like it's not just one apple in the barrel that's rotten here. The whole barrel of apples is rotten, and it's really obvious what you have to do. The second thing I was going to mention is freedom. There's this complete crazy argument that somehow freedom is really important. Freedom from, technology being watched, being being censored, being able to put your comments on some sort of social media app without being censored. The independence and freedom of being able to say what you want to say. Freedom to choose the job you want. Freedom to have, choose your things you buy. Freedom to not to have to worry about your finances. Does anybody really understand what freedom is? It's a myth. It's a complete con. No one is free. No physical person, this body, is free. How can we be free? I mean, we have a few senses to sense the world. We have no control over 90% plus, and that's probably 99% plus, of the things that this body does. I've never actually physically seen my own face. When I look at it in a mirror, I've never seen the back of my head. I can't go for more than a few hours without going to the loo. If I say I'm free, I have to decide when I go to the loo. Well, good luck with that. I have to sleep every night. I was born in a certain country because my parents were there. They chose the country to live in. If my parents had moved to Australia, I'd be speaking with an Australian accent. And it's on and on and on and on. So where is the freedom? What exactly are we talking about when we say we want freedom? Somebody's trying to offer you something that is completely undeliverable. But what's worse is the people who are offering you freedom, they want to take away whatever little bit of freedom you might have. Out of that menu of things that you have no control over, the side order, even the side order, there's no freedom, because they will deny you that freedom. They will tell you that they want you to have freedom because they know you're desperate to have freedom, even though most people have no clue what freedom really is. And then they will deny it from you. I mean, here's a really good example. Donald Trump, or any of these people, but Donald Trump's a good example. See how free the leaders of countries are to stand up to Donald Trump and say, no, what you're saying is nonsense and I think it's disrespectful. None of them do that. I have nothing. I'm just a small guy in comparison to these politicians. But on the side order, the freedom side order, I could actually, if I wanted to, could meet the guy, which I haven't got the freedom to meet the guy. But if I didn't like what he said, I could just say, this is rubbish. They can't do that. They can't do it because of the money and the influence and the power and their fear that they'll get kicked out. Yet all these people talk about freedom. Freedom and democracy. We're fighting for the freedom of people in other countries. It's complete nonsense. We have to understand what we really are. This is not about saying we don't have freedom or do have freedom. This is about saying that this whole conversation about freedom is rubbish. I'm a male. I'm not female. So there's a whole pile of things that females can do that I cannot do and I will never be able to do. And I don't want to do. So the other thing is that not having freedom to do certain things is no big deal. Do I really want the freedom to be able to swivel my head 360 degrees? No. There's so many constraints in this body that it's fine. So these arguments about freedom are just nonsense arguments. And if we really, as human beings, could see that true freedom and true democracy is where we can actually open our eyes and go, I'm free from this complete rubbish bull, this fantasy, nonsensical stuff that drives everything in our media. 90% plus of the media stories that are out there in the mainstream in English-speaking countries like the US, UK, every day are full of propaganda. I wouldn't say lies, but twisted information, distorted information, narratives that have been configured by people who have agendas. And they're complete, in my view, the stories are generally complete and utter nonsense. In fact, for me, I just can't even listen to most of it now because I just feel this is just insanity. Here's a really great example. We have a Prime Minister, Starmer, who wants a coalition of the willing to go and send thousands of troops into Ukraine to fight Russia. Or to protect Ukraine, which is really to fight Russia. Just look at that in itself. Our Prime Minister wants to take probably the 30 or 40 active soldiers in the UK who've not really been in active duty, put them into a country that's at war against another country which probably has the ability to call up 1 million soldiers, of which large percentages have seen active duty. And then you might say, okay, well, we're trying to protect Ukraine, so let's have a look at the logistics of this. Supposing the French and the British and maybe one or two other countries put in 100,000 troops in there. Supposing they managed to trounce the Russians. I mean, they saved the Ukrainians and they destroy the Russians. They kill hundreds of thousands of Russians. What do you think the next thing that's going to happen is? The next thing that's going to happen is nuclear war. That's what's going to happen. So you have a Prime Minister in the UK who wants to send your children into a war for which there is no winning. The win is tens of thousands of your own dead, tens of thousands of probably Russians and Ukrainians dead. If you win the ground battle, then it's basically nuclear escalation. How insane is all of that? And we have this whole madness, and you get people cannot. I don't believe people see it. That they cannot say, "Hold on, what's the obvious thing here?" The obvious thing here is people talk to each other, and even when the narcissistic Trump, with always of his own agenda, which is like, we want to get the hell out of Ukraine and we don't care about them, which they never did because it was a proxy war. Even then, you see the Europeans going, no, they don't want peace. But what do they want? It's madness. And the crazy part is that if you're somebody who says, I can see arguments from both sides, and I can see that perhaps Putin is right here, but maybe Starmer should do this, and I don't particularly like Trump, but actually it's good he's looking for peace. People don't want to know. They want you to be pro-Trump, anti-Trump, pro-war, anti-war, whatever. If you're not in those teams, you're out. And that's not how it works. I listened to, John Mearsheimer and Jeffrey Sachs, particularly Jeffrey Sachs, who said to the European Union, you should get on the phone now and start talking directly with Trump. Sorry, not with Trump, with Putin. No, we can't. They sit down with Trump and listen to the complete rubbish that he speaks and the insults and his complete disregard for other countries. He basically called the Irish thieves when the Irish Prime Minister came across. They all sit there and just go, yes, Mr. Trump, of course, Mr. Trump, yes, exactly, yeah, and we understand. It's totally hypocritical. And that's not freedom. What freedom is in that? None. And so, I suppose what I'm trying to express in my video here is that we all need to wake up. The next stage of these kind of crazy, mad situations that we're in is that we elect a completely different group of people who are worse than the people we had before, and do stuff that's totally unhinged. And the problem we have in the world is that we've got so much technology and so much advancement going on that unhinged people can do crazy stuff and cause really big problems for the globe. You see what's going on in the US, but in reality, the tragic part of it is that the president of the US has got the ability to press a button and start nuclear war. And you've got, I don't know, half an hour to stop it. And it has nearly happened by accident more than once. We've nearly had situations where the world was going to be in a nuclear conflict simply because of misinformation, miscommunication. But also, look at what's going on in Gaza. Clearly, we have Western powers who claim that they're really into freedom and democracy, who are totally supporting murder of tens of thousands of innocent people. Clearly. Not only that, we have courts who come out and adjudicate, and they dismiss the courts. Oh, well, no, we're not signing up to the UN Court for Justice or whatever it might be. It's complete madness. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu gave President Trump a present of a golden pager on a cross-section of an olive tree. Olive trees grow for hundreds of years. There is really nature's symbol it's a beautiful symbol of something that provides a really healthy food. It provides a living for people, and it grows for hundreds of years. It doesn't ask for anything. So they cut one down, and they mount a golden pager on that olive tree. And those pagers, an act of terrorism, 100% act of terrorism, where people had their groins, pieces of their groins blown off, they had fingers blown off, and they said, oh, but it was the terrorists. It was thousands of people that were injured. And people who were caught up. You know, if you're driving a car and your pager blows up while you're driving and you've got somebody sitting beside you, is that a terrorist? But also, doctors use pagers because signal issues and interference with equipment. So you have a whole lot of medical people who probably ended up with terrible injuries out of that. And that guy gives a golden pager, I mean, on a an olive tree cross section. How ridiculous! And it's on and on and on and on. The ridiculousness of it all. The even sadder thing is that I talk to you. You are a sentient, living creature. You have got family, probably. You've got children, a wife, a mother. But all this nonsense that we're seeing is complete and utter nonsense that could be stopped. Could be stopped in seconds with rational, respectful people who weren't unhinged or narcissistic or deluded. Unfortunately, tens of thousands of people are being killed all the time because of it. You know, if it was just a game, like a football match, and the result was that the ball did or didn't go into a net, and maybe a couple of people had a scuffle afterwards and got drunk and, you know, had an argument and there was a punch-up. But the people in there, I mean, you look at somewhere like Ukraine, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people being killed. When you look at Gaza, just look at the tragedy in Gaza. How many children are still buried under the rubble? And that's something we cannot get away from. We can look at it and say, oh, you know, it's all politics and it's all crazy. It's nothing to do with me, mate. If your child, your son, your daughter was buried under slabs of concrete and nobody gave a stuff about her, and they were actually even killing the paramedics who came to try and save her, or you had a son who was in a trench, Ukrainian or Russian, and these people operating drones from some computer somewhere, just dropping bombs and killing them in the most gruesome ways, then you'd care. But we've become so detached from our own ability to feel a humanity towards other people. In fact, I find it really frustrating that soldiers seem to be just put in a category of their own. I've mentioned this before in previous videos. Oh, they're soldiers. They're soldiers. They signed up for that. Most of these people didn't sign up. Somebody knocked on the door and said, "You must sign up." Of course. I've seen videos of people being dragged out of their houses in Ukraine, young men, to sign up because they've lost so many people. They need younger and younger people to fight, and they just take people off the streets. So where do you get your information from if you want to feel that it's anyway reasonable or anyway normal? You can get it, but you have to first ask yourself, what am I doing? Am I just trying to watch some sort of pantomime or some sort of movie? What's this doing to me? This idea that every day there's a roller coaster ride and it's something outrageous going on. And, you know, what is it that we, looking inward into ourselves, what am I getting out of this? I'm getting some sort of, you know, buzz out of watching all these crazy things going on that have very little kind of any rationality to them. I mean, I would bet you that before the Ukrainian war started, 90% of people had no clue what NATO actually really did. And most people would have said, if we can save a few 100,000 lives, we're happy for a country to say we won't be in NATO, we'll be neutral. There are lots of neutral countries in the world totally independent. Do you really have to kill all the people in a country because a few of them could commit what's deemed to be a terrorist act? It's all complete insanity. That's what I'm saying. It's nuts. It's insane. And it has the potential to completely destroy humanity at some stage. And I think it's slowly killing us all. And everybody in their soul, in their heart, knows that at the bottom level, on the bottom line, it's completely wrong. Because the pain and suffering of losing someone close to you tells us that. The loss of a child, the loss of a son, the loss of a daughter, through whether it's having to fight in the military or through act of terrorism or being killed as a civilian in some sort of conflict. And we watch this pantomime every day, and we watch these completely unhinged people who sit there and adjudicate and say, it's them, they're the right wing. Oh, we don't want right wing parties taking over. What's more right wing than allowing somebody to kill tens of thousands of innocent people? And worse, that it's all evidenced. That there are people who show it all happening with video phones and smartphones and everything else, and it's all there. Complete insanity. And totally unnecessary. That's the other sad part of it. It's totally unnecessary. And totally fixable. But everything that we're doing in society revolves around a load of complete nonsense that has no credibility, that can be, from an argumentative point of view, can be wiped out so easily, and for which there are so many solutions. But within such a soup of nonsense, it's very difficult to get to the point where you can get your hand up and say, look, this is how we can fix this, because you'll be shut down. Shut down, shut down. And it won't just be the freedom fighters that are helping you. Many of the freedom fighters have got such agendas of their own. They'll be saying, no, you're not on that side. You're not on this side, so you're our enemy too. You've got to be with us or be with them. So we've all got to be on the side of trying to find a deeper truth, getting good quality information and evidence from people who don't have agendas, who aren't being paid by other people, who aren't looking for eyeballs to get monetary rewards from advertising, from subscribers, any of that stuff. All that has to go. Open our eyes up, get the right information, and then go, okay, this is what we can do. Let's try it. And let's make the system work. And let's be honest about what we mean by freedom and democracy. What is a democracy? How does a democracy work? What kind of freedoms can I seriously think about having? Of the menu of constraints in my world, what are the things I can really, really have an influence on? And how could I make sure, or we could make sure, that people have more of an influence on things that are really important? There are very few people, I think, today, if you ask them, have they got the influence to help to make the decision about whether we go into World War III or not? You'll find most people say we have no influence, none whatsoever. The biggest decision ever. Even just conflicts, you'll notice that the elected representatives just go off and do their own thing. We're going to fight that country because they use the color green, because they have wings and fly, because they don't buy our cars, because they make better things than us, because there's an organization that they should be in, and we say if they're not in it, they're all basically evil and bad. All nonsense. What freedom have we to choose whether these arguments and these ideas push us into some terrible situation where a large number of innocent people are forced either to fight or just killed as casualties. So if you want to have some sort of freedom, you're never going to get it from the BS that you're hearing from the people who pretend every day to be fighting for freedom and democracy. When they don't care about freedom and democracy, they have no idea what it actually is, and they don't care about having an idea about what it actually is. And unfortunately, by the time they have wreaked havoc and destruction, they'll be gone. You will be left with the mess, and they'll be nowhere to be seen. So, a bit of food for thought. Again, I would highly recommend you listen to John Mearsheimer and Jeffrey Sachs on the really big geopolitical issues, because I think those two guys, I don't agree with everything they say, but I think those two guys are genuine, and I think they're very evidence-based and practical, and they're the guys we need more of those types of people in the decision-making system, who aren't influenced by money, who are experienced, who are smart, who are wise, who can see what's really going on, who aren't tribalistic, don't take sides. They'll take some from one, some from the other. They see what they perceive to be strengths and weaknesses in everything, and they're willing to talk to the perceived enemy if it means that they can further their agenda. And their agenda is always about peace, finding a peaceful solution for people to live decent lives. That's what they're all about. So I really recommend you listen to them. Thank you, and see you at my next blog.